psychological tool with actual clinical trials behind it for IBD. It's being used in specialist centres right now, and I'd be willing to bet your gastroenterologist has never once mentioned it to you. Hi, I'm Kate, and today we're talking about acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and why I think it might be one of the most underused tools in the entire Crohn's toolkit. Because here's the thing. Managing Crohn's isn't just about what's happening in your gut, it's about what's happening in your head, and that part deserves the same serious attention. I want to start with something my son said to me a few years back when he was in the thick of it. He looked at me and said, "Mum, I'm so tired of being scared. Not tired of the pain, not tired of the medication, but tired of the fear. The constant waiting, is this the start of a flare? Every single time his stomach moved. The way he stopped making plans because, well, what was the point? His body might cancel them anyway. And I see this in my practice all the time. People who are technically doing okay on their medication, inflammation is managed, scopes look pretty good, but they're not okay. They're anxious about food. They've quietly shrunk their life down to a size that feels manageable. They've stopped doing things they love because Crohn's might show up and ruin it. And my husband, 20 years flare-free now, 3 surgeries behind him, he'd tell you that the mental recovery took longer than the physical. That learning to trust his body again was its own journey entirely. And this is the part of Crohn's care that almost nobody talks about, and it's exactly what ACT is designed for. Here's what most people assume when I mention psychological tools for Crohn's. They think I'm about to tell them that it's all in their head, or that if they just think more positively, their gut will cooperate. That is not what I'm saying, and that is not what ACT is. ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is not positive thinking. It's not just relax. It's not a coping platitude. It's a structured, evidence-based approach that has been tested in randomized controlled trials, specifically in people with IBD. Studies have shown reductions in psychological distress and genuine improvements in their quality of life. This isn't fringe. It's being used in IBD specialist centers right now. And here's the key thing that makes ACT different. Most psychological tools try to help you feel better by changing your thoughts or eliminating the difficult feelings. Well, ACT doesn't do that. ACT says the goal isn't to get rid of the fear or the pain. The goal is to stop letting them run your life. And that's a completely different target. And for people with a chronic condition that is genuinely unpredictable, genuinely painful, and genuinely not going away, that reframe is everything. You're not trying to convince yourself Crohn's isn't hard. You're just learning to move forward with that thought anyway. So let me walk you through how ACT actually works in the context of Crohn's. There are 2 core moves I want you to understand, and then I'm going to give you one concrete exercise that you can try today. So ACT sits within what's called third wave cognitive behavioral therapy. But you don't need to know the theory. What you need to know is this. ACT is built on the observation that struggling against difficult thoughts and feelings often make things worse, not better. Think about the last time you had a scary symptom. Maybe a bit of cramping, a change in your pattern. What happened in your mind? For most people with Crohn's, the brain immediately goes to the worst case. This is a flare, the medication stopped working, I'm going to end up in hospital, I can't go on that trip, I can't do my job. And then you spend enormous energy trying to fight that thought, reassuring yourself, Googling, checking, avoiding anything that might trigger it, and the fear doesn't go away. It actually gets louder. ACT calls this the struggle, and it says the struggle itself is costing you more than the original thought did. So the first core move in ACT is called cognitive diffusion. Diffusion means learning to see a thought as just a thought, not as a fact, not as a command, and not as a prediction of the future. When my son was deep in his anxiety about food, genuinely scared to eat because he associated eating with pain, his brain was telling him a very convincing story. If I eat that, I'll be sick. If I go out for dinner, I'll have an episode. It's not safe. Those thoughts felt completely real. They felt like the truth, but they were really just thoughts, and diffusion is the skill of noticing that difference. A simple diffusion technique is this. Instead of thinking, I'm going to have a flare, you practice saying, I'm having the thought that I'm going to have a flare. That tiny, tiny shift in language, I'm having the thought that, creates a little bit of space between you and the story your brain is telling. You're not arguing with the thought. You're not trying to replace it with a positive one. You're just stepping back from it slightly. It sounds almost too simple, but that small step is the beginning of not being controlled by it. The second core move is value-based action. And this is where ACT gets really, really powerful for people with Crohn's. ACT asks you a question that most medical appointments never ask. And that question is, what matters to you? Not what are your symptoms, not what are you afraid of, but what kind of life do you actually want to be living? Because what happens with chronic illness, and I watched this with my husband through years of surgery and recovery, is that life quietly contracts. You stop doing the things that light you up because it feels safer. And then one day you realize that Crohn's has taken over, not just your gut, but your whole identity and your whole life. Values-based action says, even when your body is difficult, even when there's uncertainty, you can still take small steps towards what matters to you. Not recklessly, not ignoring your body, but not waiting until you feel perfect to start living either. Because let's be honest, when is it ever perfect for anybody? Maybe that's committing to one social event a month, even though you're nervous. Maybe it's going back to a hobby you dropped. Maybe it's having a conversation you've been avoiding because you didn't have the emotional energy. So this is a classic exercise I'm going to share with you next. And it's a classic exercise ACT uses, and it's one of the most accessible places to start. What I want you to do is find somewhere quiet. Close your eyes if that's okay. Picture yourself sitting beside a gently moving stream. Leaves are floating past on the surface of the water. Now, as a thought comes into your mind, place each one on a leaf and watch it float by. Don't chase the leaf. Don't try to stop it. Don't jump in the water after it. Just notice it, place it on a leaf, and let it move downstream. If you find yourself getting pulled into a thought, analyzing it, arguing with it, getting anxious about it, just notice that and gently come back to the stream. You can do this for 5 minutes. Now, you're not trying to empty your mind, you're practicing the skill of watching thoughts without being swept away by them. For someone with Crohn's, where the mind is often full of fear and worst-case scenarios, this is training. It's like physiotherapy for your relationship with your own thoughts. Now, this works alongside your medical care, not instead of it. So I want to be clear about that. ACT is not a replacement for your gastroenterologist, your medication, your scopes, your biologics. None of that. Crohn's is a serious inflammatory disease and it needs serious medical management. What ACT does is address the layer of suffering that medication cannot touch. The fear, the identity loss, the life shrinking, the waiting for the next disaster dread, and the research shows that when you address that layer, people's quality of life, well, it genuinely improves. If you wanted to explore this further, look for a psychologist or therapist trained specifically in ACT. Some IBD centers now have integrated psychological support. It's worth asking your team whether that's available to you. My son said he was tired of being scared. What ACT gave him, alongside everything else we did, was a way to stop organizing his whole life around that fear. He still has Crohn's, he still has hard days, but he makes plans now, he travels, he eats at restaurants, he doesn't wait for permission from his gut to live his life. And that's what I want for you. Not a promise that things will be easy, not a guarantee that fear disappears, but a real studied, practical way to stop letting the fear be the one making your decisions. You deserve to have your whole life back, not just your inflammation numbers. Now, if this resonated with you, please share it with someone in the Crohn's community who needs to hear it. This is the kind of information that doesn't make it into the 15-minute GI appointment, but it should. If you want to go deeper on this, come and find me in the Crohn's Method community. I'll see you in the next video, and have a beautiful day.